Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Wendy Dillard here. Today is Thursday, May 31st, 2018, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, your second daily dose of happy for the day. And thank you for spending some time with us today. We appreciate it. We're at the end of May already. I mean, what happened to January, February, March, and April? I mean, didn't 2018 just start like last week or something?
You know, it's not the monthly thing that seems so shocking to me, but to recognize we're in 2018 and we're almost at the halfway point, that seems kind of wild.
It's bizarre. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly why it is, but it over the last few years, last 10 years or so, it just seems like everything accelerates in terms of my perception of time. And I need that's definitely a sign I've made progress, but I still have a ways to go because I want to be stretching out that now and making it feel like it goes on forever. Oh, geez. How you doing? You having a good day?
I am having a good day. This week I've been on vacation from the day job, and what's been on my mind was to play with my website, which I got to tell you, I'm so happy to be doing it because for so long I've known that my website needed an overhaul, especially my homepage, because I really wasn't very clear what I did and why anybody should hire me. And you know, I kept, like, how many vacations have I had? You know, I get vacations quite often from the day job, and each time I do, I think, well, maybe this will be the time that I get to work on my website, and I'll ask my inner being, and it'll be, no. Well, I guess it was over the weekend, or maybe it was even last week. I don't even remember the timing. I was laying in bed in the morning, which is my normal, like, get new insight time. And I got a ton of information about what makes me unique in terms of life coaching and why somebody would want to hire me specifically and what's my unique advantage, over somebody else. And so I quickly jumped out of bed and I wrote it all down. I took up like a whole page on a ledger sheet. And then I put it on my desk and I was like, oh yeah, I get to work on it. And I got, no, not yet.
Your inner voice can be a little bit annoying at times, I should say. No, not yet. No, not yet.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't hear those words so much as I sense the message, and I put my own voice to it by saying no, not yet. Because I can't just tell you the feeling that I had over the show, right?
Right.
So a couple days ago, I really had the inclination to start playing with this one graphic that I'd been having trouble with. And it took me about 3 days to figure it out because I kept getting distracted. And then it was like, before I knew it, I just started touching things on my homepage. Oh. It was not like a resounding sound where my inner being said, now is the time to begin working on your webpage.
You don't get the voice of God or something like that? That would be much more fun.
No. There's no, what is it, Earl Jones. What's the first name?
No, James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones, yeah. That booming voice does not come to me. So before I knew it, I'm like, oh, I'm playing with the text on my homepage. Well, how did this happen? And over the course of the last couple days, I played with a little here, played with a little here. I'd get new insight. I'd watch a video from somebody that I'm learning things from, and then other thoughts would come. And today, I rewrote a big portion of my homepage, and it feels really good.
Nice job.
And I was looking at it going, why have I been so afraid to write this? Because it's not like any of the concepts are new to me. And I realized it's because I didn't want to be a braggart. Most of my growing up years, I was criticized for bragging. But once upon a time, when I was a kid, yeah, I was pretty good at stuff when I was a kid, but I was bragging because I wanted the adults in my world to validate my existence. I wanted them to acknowledge, yes, I was there and I was good at something. And I felt like I was the kid in the family that sort of got overlooked in terms of getting praise. And I don't know, maybe I did get it, but it didn't saturate my head. And so I would say, hey, I'm good at this, and this is why I'm special. And nobody said anything. Or if they did, it would be like, go away, go play. And I'm like, oh. So I think I developed bragging as a habit just because I was so desirous of being acknowledged for my existence. Well, I'm not in that space anymore. I don't require the external world to validate my existence. I know I'm worthy. I know I'm wonderful. I know I'm loved.
Hooray!
Yay! And so as I've been like learning from like Josh Flagg, who he's on my show, Million Dollar Listing New York. He sells to the real estate market in the luxury market.
Oh, okay.
And I've been taking a course by him because I had the internal sense that what he's going to teach about the luxury market, I can map over to my market.
I would think.
And one of the things he talks about is you have to be an authority on your subject. You have to be confident. You have to let the people who may want to hire you know that they're hiring the right person because you stand solid in who you are. So that was like one voice. Then I was watching another program yesterday, which was another one of my $1 million listing people who has a new show. And he was working with this brand new commercial broker. 6 months she'd been there, 6 months, had no listings, had made no money, is a single mom of 3, and she was going to lose her job in 1 week if she didn't get her first listing appointment.
Wow.
And so this guy, Ryan Serhant is his name. This is his new show where he goes and helps people, you know, I guess expand their potential. This was the first time I ever watched it. And he looked at her and went, "Oh my God, she's a disaster. She's so meek. She can't stand up to anybody." It was so funny. One of the things he would do is he'd listen to her opening line and she said, between every sentence. Ouch. And he said, is the sign of lack of confidence.
Yeah.
People who have a sense of authority don't say, when you ask them a question. And for the sake of the show, it was very funny. Every time she said, you'd hear a buzzer go off, you know.
Oh, dear.
But by the end of the show, she had a power walk. She had a power voice. She had a power expression.
Oh, good
she
for her.
Led with her strengths. And I went, wow, that's interesting. Like, I know that in my head intellectually, but I saw what I wrote today on my homepage now embodied that.
That's good.
It's like I was now leading with my power face, leading with my power personality. And it's just so interesting. Like, I can't believe me, the big, powerful personality that I am, was leading with this meek and mild, like, well, I don't know if, you know, you're going to like me or if I'm the one for you. It's like, oh, please, I'm over that.
Yeah, enough of the whinging already. Let's just say, hey, I'm here. I'm great. Sign up. Button over there.
And like one of my favorite power players is Patty Stanger on Millionaire Matchmaker. And she'll get in someone's face and scream and yell. And she goes, if I can't find a match for you, who can? Now, that's the voice of authority.
It's actually a rather annoying voice at that rate. But yeah, I get your point.
It is. But I thought, wow, I was not playing the most natural thing I have, which is coming from my power base. So anyway, long story short, I have revamped my homepage. It makes me feel so much better. Like, that's who I am. That's what I am here to provide. I know I have a few more tweaks I want to make, but right now it's like, wow, complete different message than how I've messaged myself in the past. So I'm really proud of myself.
Well, good. You should be. And, you know, the thing I've often noticed about homepages and text and all that kind of stuff, messages that get put out, because, I mean, I've done quite a bit with that, doing websites for people over the years. And the one thing I noticed more than anything else, when you put in that authoritative voice like you're talking about, it isn't so much the wording. That's what I discovered. The wording actually isn't that big of a deal. It's the emotional energy. If the emotional energy comes through, then you sound strong. You sound authoritative. If the energy that comes through is flat, it doesn't matter how, you know, it doesn't matter whether the wording actually says how powerful you are. If the wording feels flat, it's just going to feel flat no matter what. So the fact that you were talking about how it made you feel so good, that told me, I don't even have to look at it. That told me that it was effective.
Well, and you know, like one of the things Josh Flagg does, the Los Angeles realtor, he knows every single house in the areas that he services. He knows when they were built. He knows how many occupants or how many different people have owned it. He knows what the last selling price was. He knows in every area what the median selling price is per foot. He knows what's trending. He knows what businesses are coming in. He knows what celebrities are there. And it's like when I listen to him on the show, his Rolodex of information is just staggering.
Yeah.
And he said, other realtors that want to come into that area and compete against him, he said they have a hard time doing it because there's a lot of research and studying that goes into why he knows what he knows.
Right, sure.
And I've always thought that was like a really interesting perspective. And yeah, if I lived in LA, I'd want him to be my realtor because he knows everything about everything.
Sure.
And sometimes I feel that way. Like in my subject areas that I'm an expert, I know everything about everything in my little arena,
Yeah.
But I've never felt comfortable telling anybody that, and I think for a long time I felt I felt uncomfortable. I felt a little like I don't know how to set myself aside because like there's so many life coaching courses out there now that somebody can get certified just by taking a course, but it doesn't mean they have any experience in coaching. It doesn't mean they're good with people. It really doesn't mean much of anything except you've taken a course. And, from what I can tell, because I took one of those courses because I wanted to see what was being taught. And they're being told to like charge like anywhere from $100 to $150 an hour. Now, I'm not saying a life coach isn't worth that and then some. But if you have a brand new newbie, I'll be honest with you, I don't want to cut my teeth on somebody who's brand new who just got their certification yesterday, and I don't know if they can really do anything. And I thought, how can I set myself apart? I've been doing this for 25 plus years. I've got so much experience. And then in addition to that, it's like all of a sudden the light bulb went off. And I realized I'm not just a coach. I actually went and I looked up what is a life coach. And it basically said someone who motivates other people and emotionally supports them in helping them to implement their goals.
That's a good, concise decision, or definition rather. That makes sense.
It's a good definition, but I'm like, okay, but I'm also a transformational expert. I've got not only the skills, but an expertise because I've been doing it for a long time, helping people shift beliefs in a way that we're now calling quantum leaps. Now, not every life coach can do that.
That's true.
That's something I do. But it's like I never told anybody I could do it.
Oops.
And there were like a whole list of things that I do. And I'm like, well, if I never told anybody on my website that I do that, how do they know? So now I put it out. It's out there on the first page. These are all the things that I do. And when you hire me, you get multiple service professionals all in one person called Wendy.
Yeah.
And it was like, wow, now that sets me apart.
Absolutely.
And it kind of helps me feel more comfortable with my pricing structure because, yes, I'm higher than the average life coach. But you know what? When you hire me, you're getting a whole lot more than the average life coach.
There you go.
And it's like, wow, this is
very
feeling good. But it was interesting because the money piece was first. Like I had to feel the energy to charge what I charge. And now I'm finally putting in text that mirrors what I charge. Because I could tell for a while it was inconsistent. It wasn't feeling congruent. So it's feeling so much better. And I got to tell you, my website, I don't know how other people feel about their websites, but to me, a website, especially when you're a solopreneur, not only is your reputation, but it's who you are. And I didn't feel like what I was putting out there was really representing who I am in a way that did me justice.
But now
it feels great. Now I have a new picture, one that my niece took when we did a photo session back in November. And it's like, wow, that picture says a whole lot more. It's not so stiff, because I'm not a very stiff kind of gal.
No,
I'm kind of like big personality. So, and I'm very casual. I'm not a formal person, never have been. And so it's a more casual picture. And, now the text reflects me better and my pricing reflects what I do better. And, then I created some graphics, and it was such a fun process. And I laugh because for months I've been saying, can I do it now? And it's like, no, not yet. Can I do it now? No, not yet. And finally, I guess, I won't say all the planets aligned and I'm ready to go, but who I am has made enough changes and shifts that it's time for that to be reflected appropriately in my website.
And I really like the fact that you talked about how important it is to recognize what you have in your tool set. What's that accumulation of knowledge that makes what you do so special? Like you talked about the guy who was the realtor who had all of this information he'd accumulated that was in his Rolodex, so to speak, right at his fingertips. And
right.
It actually reminded me of a term that's actually archaic now, but it used to mean something really important in the political world. It was called a Farley File. And it was named for James Farley, who was Franklin Roosevelt's campaign manager and later became the chairman of the DNC. And he was very famous for having created basically a file that collected all of the information that FDR had gleaned from people as he was talking to them on the campaign trail. Farley was recording it all and putting it into cards and so forth. Now, not for every single person that they met, but for all the, quote, important, unquote, people that they met. Anybody who they might later on have a contact with, or they're asking for money, or whatever, that kind of a thing. So that the next time that person came to the White House, or FDR was out on the trail or whatever, and that person was there, Farley could hand FDR a card, and the card would say, here's what the person's wife's name is, and what the 3 kids are, and the dog, and he had all the profile about. So now he could just talk to that person like, oh yeah, I remember who you are, and yada yada yada, and endear himself to that particular constituent. Well, that sounds really blasé today. At that time, that was almost unheard of. And that's what made the Farley File such an amazing device for that time. Of course, this was the 1930s. To the point where it became named. I mean, it was named for this one guy who was FDR's chairman. And what you're talking about with that guy with the real estate is basically a modern version of a Farley File. I mean, in his case, it's probably a database, but still, it's the same basic concept. You accumulate all the information that's useful to your trade, so that when you need it, boy, you sound like you know exactly what you're talking about because you actually do. It's right there.
And I'll bet at one point he put it into a spreadsheet or whatever. But what's so cool about him is it's all in his head. He doesn't require looking at a spreadsheet to know all the data.
That's the really amazing part.
You name any address, he'll tell you all the information about it. And I kind of think that way about me, because 25 years ago or so, when I was learning things, I remember the day when I would have a session with somebody and I had a notebook in front of me, and I was referring to my notebook to do a certain process where it would tell me, ask this question, then ask this question. And I knew what to do with it once I had the questions answered, but I followed a script for some of the processes that were really in depth because it just took me a long time to kind of memorize them, put it that way. Today, I just sit down and start talking. Whatever somebody has on their mind, I've got that internal file system where I'm ready to go. I've been doing this a really long time. Mm-hmm. I don't have to look it up in a notebook to go, oh shoot, what's step 3 of that process?
What's
I only
step 3?
remember the first 2 steps. And I'll tell you the nicest part, or why I feel like it feels so easy for me now, is because I rely on my inner being. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, you wouldn't believe how much I rely on my inner being. Mm-hmm. And I know I've said this a couple times. I shared it a little bit yesterday, but the new thing that's coming to me is when I'm talking with somebody, all of a sudden I'll get a flashback to some experience in my life, and I now know that that's my signal for the lesson I learned then, or the feeling I have about that memory is what's appropriate to deliver to my client right here and now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, that could I put all those things in a spreadsheet? Probably not. But
probably
thank
not.
goodness, my inner being knows every bit of stuff that I've learned, every epiphany that I've had, and it comes into mind when it's necessary.
Not only could you have not put that in a spreadsheet, you probably couldn't have put it on your homepage either. You had to condense it in a way.
And, I'll tell you, that reminds me, I will, honestly, when I do a session with someone, what I come away with is so exciting to me because I'll have awareness of how many places within the session I got a download from my inner being, where I got insight, say this, do this, share this story. Okay, take them down this road, go with this process, ask these questions. And to me, it's so fun because I get to spend the entire session just letting my inner being speak with me. And like while the client is talking, I'll be asking questions and my inner being's feeding me information. And it's like, it reminds me of, movies that we've seen where somebody has an earbud and they're being fed information, by somebody out in the van.
Right.
And that's kind of what it feels like sometimes when I'm having conversations with my inner being. It's like the person who I'm working with doesn't realize that while they're talking, I'm asking questions and I'm getting new insight. So when they take a breath and it's time for me to talk, boom, I've got information on tap. And it's like really cool.
I want to take a moment to, first of all, to welcome some of the newer listeners, because one of the wonderful side effects of the new book that we put out is that with all of the references to LOA Today in that book, we are starting to get people who are checking us out who hadn't checked us out before, didn't even know to check us out. And I just wanted, first of all, to say welcome. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that you'll decide to tune in more often. And second of all, to tell you, well, here's the easy way to do that. It's something that we haven't spent a lot of time on recently, but we're going to do it a little bit more now going forward with all the new listeners coming in. And that is to tell you how to subscribe to the podcast. It's actually pretty easy to do, and all of our most consistent listeners do exactly that, so they don't miss a single episode. In fact, our numbers show very clearly that the average listener listens to somewhere between 30 and 45 podcasts a month. So clearly there's a lot of subscribing going on. But the subscribing is really easy. Just go to the homepage at loatoday.net. You probably were sent there in the first place from the book. And just right there on the page, you'll see where to how to subscribe and share. All the instructions are right there. So just follow the instructions. Pretty simple. And then when you're done, use one of the social media icons and share with your friends. Let them know about it too, because we want to keep passing it along. But please do subscribe and share. And thanks for tuning in.
Nicely done, and welcome aboard to everybody who's a new listener.
Absolutely. And we are seeing it, by the way. The numbers are starting to creep up in terms of the average daily downloads. So hopefully that's a trend that will continue.
And one of our regulars, in her email that she sent to us, she says that the shows with me sometimes are like a soap opera. But she wrote in French.
Did she really say that?
A good one.
I hope so.
And she called it, like Wendy's Journey. And I'm like, I like how she represented it. And I know all of your co-hosts, provide something different. But something that is very near and dear to my heart is that I have always wanted to have a platform where I could share what's really going on in my life, not because I'm important, but because the processes that I follow and the ways that I hear from my inner being and how I utilize law of attraction in my just mundane everyday life is the kind of stuff that I know people really want to know, because it's one thing to read a book about law of attraction. It's one thing to go to an Abraham Hicks seminar or listen to them on YouTube. But sometimes that information is high level or big picture or kind of generic. Or like with Abraham, it's geared specifically for the person sitting in the hot seat. And I know I have a lot of clients that come to me because they say, I've been reading about law of attraction. I've seen the movie The Secret. I've done the vision boards, but I don't know how to apply it to my life. I don't know how it really works. And so I've come to recognize not only is applying it the thing that I'm an expert at, but what makes me unique is that I tell people, and this is how I do it in my life. It doesn't mean everybody else is going to do it the same way or even receive guidance in the exact same way, but at least I'm giving an illustration of what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And
sure.
So for any new listeners, yes, you may find that I kind of give you my personal journey in soap opera style, but that's who I am, and that's the way I like to do it.
So does this mean that I should go try to find some like old style, old soap opera organ music to play periodically throughout the show?
No, because hopefully we have a myriad of listeners from all sorts of different age groups. So we don't want people who are like really young to go, what the heck are they playing?
It'd be like an old time radio show, you know?
Yes. Oh, yes. My mother used to listen to Milton Berle, I believe, on the radio. That was one of her favorites.
Well, maybe we should subtitle it as The Wendy Turns. No, that doesn't work. Wait
There you go. I was going to say millennials will go, Milton Berle? What's a Milton Berle?
What's a Milton Berle? Right? Well, now that we've dated ourselves completely.
No, I'm not dating right now, but thank you. But I am open. I'm definitely open to relationships.
Call now. So have we caught up for the day? Should we get to the main topic, or do we have more we need to cover in the preview part?
No, I think that covers it. My soap opera is ended for right now in this session, but who knows what else will pop up once we start reading.
Da, 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 da. Oh, no theme music, I forgot. Okay, so we are working on the law of attraction, the basics of the teachings of Abraham. This is the best primer, really, that's out there, in my opinion, and I think in your opinion too, Wendy, because there are a lot of books out there that explain the law of attraction, but this one does it in the best simple terms, but also in the best detail of anything that I've ever seen. And that's one of the reasons we are working our way through it. We are in part 4, and we're up to a section where we just discussed, for those of you who might remember from the other day, we were talking about an illustration that Jerry had worked on about, well, it's like when I go fishing, when I fish, I fish without a barbed hook, and I don't fish to kill the fish and all that kind of stuff. And he was so upset about, well, what about other people who don't behave the way I do? And so Abraham was kind of going through that with him. And now we're up to a subsection that kind of follows through on that. This one is entitled, Will Ignoring the Unwanted Allow the Wanted? And so Jerry, continuing the conversation, said, well, the way I resolved that dilemma, the dilemma being, how to deal with however the people were reacting and handling fishing, in essence, was that back in 1970 and for the following 9 years, I completely turned off my input from what I'll call the outside world. I turned off my television and my radio. I didn't read newspapers anymore. And I also turned off a lot of people who were talking about things I didn't want to hear. Now, again, that decision worked for me. It worked so well that during the 9-year period, I achieved what I felt were magnificent results in the areas of the meaningful relationships that evolved with many other people, the regaining and maintaining of perfect physical health, and the development of significant financial resources. It was fulfilling, like nothing that had happened before in my life. But by shutting out that negative input in that way and keeping my attention upon my intentions, it was really more like just sticking my head in the sand than it was what you're calling allowing.
Good point. And Abraham says, there is great value to giving your attention to what is important to you. And as you put your head in the sand, so to speak, closing out much of the outside influences, you were able to focus upon that which was important to you. As you give thought to anything, you draw power, clarity, and results to it, you see. And as you do, you receive contentment, the contentment that comes only from wanting, allowing, and achieving. As far as being one who was ignoring or putting your head in the sand, not paying attention rather than being an allower, perhaps those fit better than you think. Giving your attention to what is important to you is the process by which you will allow others to be that which they want to be. To give your attention to yourself while you allow them to give their own attention to themselves is a very important process and in the art of becoming an allower.
And Jerry answers, in other words, because I was expecting, although I'd never heard the words before, the law of attraction and the deliberate creation process to work for me, I had automatically shifted into the stage of allowing, in a sense of the word.
And Abraham says that is correct. You were giving your attention to what was important to you, therefore attracting more of that, which made watching television not interesting and reading newspapers not important. It was not that you were depriving yourself of something that you wanted. Instead, by the law of attraction, you were drawn more to what you wanted, what you most wanted. As you observe things on the television or in the newspaper that because you don't want them make you feel negative emotion, you hinder your allowance of what you do want.
That had a really interesting thing in there. That first response from Abraham said something that is quite different from what we're used to hearing. I want to repeat it because it was really very noteworthy. Giving your attention to what is important to you is the process by which you will allow others to be that which they want to be. That's not the way we normally think about it, but boy, is it true.
So explain that, because like that was kind of a for me too. So
yeah.
What are you getting out of that?
Well, giving your attention to what is important to you is the process by which you allow others to be that which they want to be. Really, let's go back to what the phrase means, to put your head in the sand, because I think that was a really telling phrase to include. Putting your head in the sand is a phrase that is used almost inevitably by somebody who is complaining that you're not paying attention to what they think is important. And that if you refuse to listen to their admonition against putting your head in the sand, then there's something wrong with you. But what Abraham is pointing out is when you, quote, put your head in the sand, unquote, what you're really doing is not interfering in anybody else. You're not telling them how to live their lives. So you're actually doing something that the person who uses that phrase isn't doing. You're being respectful of the other person's beliefs. You're being respectful of the other person's choices. You're being respectful of the other person's life. And
so in a way, when he stopped watching television and stopped reading newspapers, because there were things in the newspapers and TV that he didn't like, what I'm hearing is that in a way he was interfering, even if it was just energetically, by judging them for what he didn't like.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, one of the things I've noticed about politics, and I've noticed a lot about it because, well, first, I was a political science major, and second of all, I spent a large portion of my younger years paying attention to it, so I think I'm fairly well versed in the topic. One of the things I noticed more than any other out of all those years is that politics never talks about and is never focused upon anything happy. It's always about crises and chaos and fears and, you know, feeling the need to feel safe and you know, helping people who are in despair and horrible things going on. We got to fix this, and the government should be doing more. And why isn't the government? You know, it's all this stuff that is all focused on all this negative. And people who are the biggest activists are the ones who are saying, "Oh, if you aren't getting outraged and jumping in and you know, jumping on this issue because it's so important, you've got your head buried in the sand. This is my way of pummeling you for not joining the cause. Join the cause and join all of us," and getting all real negative about how negative this situation is. There are no positives in politics. There just aren't any.
You know, I've heard Abraham talk so many times about people who talk about, you know, I'm not watching TV or not watching the news, but I'm not sure if this is a good thing because it feels like I'm burying my head in the sand. And they said, we advocate that you bury your head in the sand.
Did they really say that? I like that. That's good.
Because really their perspective is, we want you to be a deliberate focuser. Choose to focus on the things that bring life to you. Choose to focus on the things that make you feel good, that are moving you in the direction of the things that you desire. And so if it means, you know, just going on a news diet where you just don't listen to the news anymore, because that's what helps you focus in a way that supports the quality of life you want, that's what we suggest you do.
Yeah, that's very important.
So,
the other thing
I know that...
Oh, go ahead. No, you first.
Well, I know that my ex-husband used to think I was crazy. You know, he'd say, isn't it a problem for you that you don't know what's going on? Because what if the Big Bang happens, or what if some big nuclear strike is about to happen? You won't be prepared. And I said, I don't know what the downside is. So if we're all going to blow up and I'm going to be transitioning, okay. It's like I don't have a fear of death either. And I just didn't see why that was a big problem. And he would talk about how, you know, we need to stockpile water. We need to we need to get a generator so we can go off the grid. And I mean, he gave it a lot of talk, but he never once took an action to buy one bottle of water.
That's funny.
Our first date was on Y2K, New Year's Eve.
Oh, wow.
And I remember him saying, like, before the date, something like, do you have water? And, have you prepared? And I'm like, I filled up a bathtub with water. That's it. That's all I've done. Well, Y2K came and went, and I didn't even realize he was supposed to go to work on January 1st, which was a Saturday, because he was in the IT field. He was scheduled to work, and they put him on the Saturday because, it's Y2K and all sorts of horrible things could happen.
Wait. Let me just interrupt for a second here. He worked in IT, and he was all worked up about what could happen with Y2K? Really?
Yeah, sort of.
Wow. I say that because, I mean, most people I knew, I was also in IT. And in fact, I was one of the people who patched up all the servers during that period of time. Most of the people who were involved in IT were like shaking their heads saying, guys, what are you getting all upset about? All this work is being done to patch everything up. There's not going to be a big crisis. So to hear somebody who was in IT who was basically worried about people putting their head in the sand, I mean, that just blows my mind.
Well, and yet he wasn't. I mean, just to put reality to it, he wasn't, because he wasn't really expecting there to be much to do the next day. And I remember him calling me from work, and he said, I'm so bored. I can't wait to get off work.
Yeah,
there's nothing
right.
to do.
There's nothing to do.
Y2K meant nothing. And really, the thing I was really, where he really put a lot of emphasis was not so much on Y2K, but later when the news would start exploiting, some political something, and how, someone from the Mideast was going to do something horrible, and we'd have terrorists, and we'd go up to, they'd blow up our grid, et cetera, et cetera. And I just was like, oh my God, you spend so much time being concerned and worried. I did think it was funny he didn't actually take action to do anything to prevent it. But nonetheless, that's a separate issue. But he was so worried for me.
Wow.
Because I didn't know this stuff. And I'm like, but I'm developing this relationship with my inner being. And if I need to know something, I'll know. Because I'll be guided toward seeing something. It's not like I never see a newspaper article. It's not like I never see news ever. I don't purposely look for it, but there are times I'm guided to it. And I said, so I just trust I'll be guided to what I need to know. And if the world comes to an end and I transition, okay. And he just thought I was just crazy. And I am, and I love it.
Well, we love you too. The thing about this actually is pointing to something. I hadn't really thought about this at all lately, so forgive me if I'm not really terribly eloquent about it, because I haven't given it any thought. But Y2K, first of all, let me just do a little quick history lesson. Y2K was basically about one thing, and that was the way operating systems and software was written leading up to the turn of the millennium. Much of the software was written in a way where the dates that get used for all kinds of things, just the date structure was not going to be, it was not originally written in a way that would be conducive to rolling over the calendar to start with 2000s. And so it would be possible for programs that were functioning to stop functioning. One of the interesting, you know how it is with the telephone game, right? The telephone game where I whisper something to you, you whisper it to the next person, and so on and so forth. And when it gets around the circle, what comes out at the other end sounds nothing like the first thing that was whispered to the first person. So one of the things that came through the whisper game with Y2K was things like there would be terrorist attack and so forth. And those of us who knew what Y2K was all about said, wait a minute. We're talking about software that just stops working. Where does a terrorist attack fit into that? They're just two entirely different, unrelated things. But because of the telephone game that the news media had played, Y2K had morphed into this thing where terrorists are going to attack and people are going to be going to war and the entire economy is going to fall into shambles. No, just computers are going to stop working. It was not that big of a deal. And as I look at what goes on today, I mean, there are a lot of issues that go on today where the computers are concerned, where internet is concerned. People are concerned about government spying. They're concerned about big companies tracking their data. They're concerned about websites being hacked. I mean, they're concerned about computers being hacked, and, reasonably so. But the way that they get concerned about it starts to blow out of proportion in amazing ways. Not that there shouldn't be concern. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I am an IT person. I have been for a long time, and I totally understand what the issues are that are involved here. But how about a little perspective, people? I mean, most of the things that people are talking about, like they talk about cyber wars, right? You get a lot of that. You get it in the political context, people campaigning for office, or people in the media who are writing about, the cyber wars are starting, and you have Russia interfering with the U.S. election and so forth. And I'm not going to say that wasn't important. It is. It is an important thing. But let's also keep it in perspective, because the way that those stories are often told makes it sound like that the Russians are going to be marching through the internet wires and emerging through our computers. That's not what's going on. And my point is, this shows that scenario that I'm describing here, and I know I kind of did it disjointedly, but that scenario shows how we allow our negative emotional patterns to blow things up way out of proportion, to the point where they become something that's so unrecognizable compared to the original issue that it isn't even funny. Well, it is actually funny, but sometimes it isn't funny. It's a reminder. Our emotions are under our control. Our emotions, we get to decide how we're going to react to any given situation. So there's actually nothing wrong with reacting positively, finding a way to look at the good side of it. It's not like putting your head in it.
Well,
it's not like
nothing wrong with focusing on positives.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. Well, but that's the way it gets treated, isn't it? Like there's something wrong with it. That's the way people look at it. Like there's something wrong with you if you aren't freaking out. Really?
Well, if somebody thinks that, my not watching the news is weird and you're saying, well, there's nothing wrong with me going in a positive direction, maybe the people who are really focused on the news media don't even recognize that it's a negative thing.
Oh, I'm sure they don't.
It's supposed to be, or it's what is, and you need to focus on what is, but it's your reality. I mean, how many times I've heard that, I can't even count. It's like, but this is reality, and you need to know what reality is. And I have this sign that was in one of my cube wall when I was at an office years ago, and I still have it now, and it says, "Reality is just your imagination."
Well, that's nice. I like that.
And I put that on my wall when I worked at this other company a long time ago. I was working at a news radio show. I worked in talk radio. And so that was the first place I got this, reality is just your imagination. But, if you listen to all the talk shows I was listening to at the time, nobody was thinking that reality was an imagination. Reality was the reality. Yeah. And it was unchangeable, unmovable, and now I just think it's all funny, because I do recognize that reality is different for every human on the planet. And we can change our reality as simply as having a new imagination.
Exactly.
But that's not a common way of thinking.
No, it's not. It's not. And actually what Jerry was talking about, when Jerry talked about how he basically withdrew from, watching television and reading the news and all that kind of stuff, I did very much the same thing, but I did it later. I did it in the late 1980s. And I missed a lot of really negative stuff. I missed one positive event, and I found out about it later anyway. But I missed one positive event out of a 3-year period. And you know what that positive event was?
No, what?
It was the falling of the wall in Berlin. It was when the communist wall came down. I missed it. I didn't know it happened. And you know what? It didn't leave a gap in my life because I found out about it later on. I remember a year after it happened is when I first found out about it. And somebody mentioned something about when the wall came down. I said, what wall? I sounded really intelligent in conversation, you see. But, that was the worst thing that I missed. I missed the wall coming down, and there was plenty of video. It's not like I couldn't see it. And once the internet came along, I could watch all the video I wanted. So I didn't really miss it.
But the wall coming down did not negatively or positively really change how your life was going to move and groove at that time.
Clearly, it didn't impact it at all. I didn't even notice it.
No, it was just a piece of information that once you got it, you're like, okay, got it, thank you.
And what did I miss? I missed a whole bunch of fear. I mean, I completely missed out on a bunch of fear, and I was better for it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is one other thing I do want to point out, and that is, I think there is validity to the idea that you don't want to just completely run away from stuff. Not because you have a requirement to get in and do something about it, but because I think there is something to be said for the idea that when we leave something behind in order to block it because we need to, give ourselves some perspective and give ourselves some room to think better thoughts and get ourselves into a better place and so forth, that's all very good. But we're still not addressing the fact that we're so easily affected by whatever that stuff is. So at some point, I think there is some validity to going back and saying, okay, how can I, in some small ways, re-expose myself to that stuff without it driving me negative crazy? You know what I mean?
Okay, what was that last sentence? How could you do what?
How can I expose myself? Let's say it's news. How can I expose myself to news in such a way that I don't have to constantly be swallowing all that negativity, but be aware that it's out there. Just okay, I've heard that there was that President Trump got elected, and I've heard this other stuff has happened, without being inundated by it and without turning it into a negative thing, so that it's affecting my attitude. It's affecting my way of dealing with life. Because the simple fact is, we can't always block out all the negatives around us. Sometimes we just have to learn how to filter them and just how to directly deal with them, in a sense, to not let them in. I do agree that there's a great benefit to blocking it physically, to just putting up a barrier so that you can get your perspective back. But once you got your perspective back, why not also use it to say, you know what, I can be exposed to that stuff and it still doesn't get in, because I am so well disciplined with my mind and focusing on what I want to focus on.
Well, and I believe that really is, the target goal that most of us who are conscious and want to be deliberate creators want to get to, that point where, negative things can happen in our environment, and the response that we have to it is no longer one where we're overcome by it.
Exactly.
Or where we feel the negative effects.
Exactly.
Because, there are some things that I know I'm very isolated from, because I've been working from my home office for the last 11 years. And so I don't go into an office. I don't listen to, quote, water cooler gossip. I'm not around a lot of people, except the ones I choose to let into my world. And I will say that for the most part, it's all an upshot. It's all a positive thing for me, because I'm getting to be deliberate about what I let in.
Right.
But what I also have noticed is when I go out where there are crowds of people and I'm around a lot of people for a long period of time, I come home really exhausted. And it's not because the events of the day wore me out. I'm very aware that I've kind of, I don't know how to say it. It's like I don't have the same level of tolerance for all the emotional, vibrational stuff that's flowing around the environment as I used to. Like, I used to be able to deny it really well.
Mm-hmm.
I was, now I feel it more intensely, because who I am has become a person who I've let my barriers down, and I do let myself feel, what's going on. Well, then I go out into an environment where there's tons of people, and I kind of forget to put some of my barriers back up so that I don't let all of that bombard me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's something I want to learn how to do in a new way, because when I was out in the world before, I just denied it all, or I just, shut myself down to not experience it. But I want to be able to go wherever I want to go and not have it overwhelm my senses.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it's a valid goal. I think it's a reachable goal, achievable, very achievable.
I have to go out into the world more often and experience more people, and then go, now what do I do with this, and how does this feel, and and that's actually a fun thing for me to do.
Yeah. I think this is where the phrase moderation in all things really does work. So there are times that phrase gets used, and I kind of like look at it askance. But this is a really good use for it. We don't want to avoid the contrast entirely. We don't want to be buried by the contrast. We want moderation. We want somewhere in the middle, a balance where yes, the contrast is still there. Yes, we're still interacting with it, but it's not flattening us.
No, I mean, really, I think ultimately, at least the way I look at it, I want things of a contrasting nature to be something that I embrace and appreciate, because contrast always creates expansion.
Exactly. It creates growth.
It always creates more, and more growth. It can also be debilitating if you stay focused on the part of it you don't like.
Right.
But if you're willing to look at it for what it is and then flip the switch to start looking for what positive thing can you get from it, it's a good thing. Like yesterday on the show, I talked about how I was feeling a sense of discouragement and disappointment for a number of hours until I let that feeling be something that I went, oh, wait a minute. This is a feeling that is telling me I'm not thinking about this the way my inner being is. Let's go check in with my inner being and see what's up.
Mm-hmm.
And some really good feelings and some new initiatives and really positive things came from it. And I have to tell you, because it was about, us not hitting number one with the paperback. Today, I feel so neutral about that. Like, if we didn't relaunch it, my life is going to go on. I would like to relaunch it. I think would be a fun thing.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like the fact that I've come to a place of neutrality, that feels awesome. It's like,
good.
I'd like to hit number one because that's my preference. If we never touch that book again, my life will be happy, So that to me was where, I know you and I have talked about the word neutral, and that's not your preferred word, but this is where, in this case, I went from being highly discouraged and disappointed to feeling neutral about the same circumstance.
Yeah, I think that's actually good. That's a good use of neutral, because neutral in this context is so much a higher vibration than the one you were in before. So getting to neutral is a tremendous improvement. I think the only real problem with neutral is if you stay there, but I don't think you're going to stay there by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, and I don't know if we never relaunched the paperback, and if we never became number one bestsellers with that paperback, would I ever be really happy, joyous, and appreciative of not achieving number one? I can't imagine that. However, I'm neutral about it. So it's not are you kind of getting where I'm going, where I don't feel the need to take myself where, no, I must find a way to get really happy about the fact that we didn't make number one. I don't feel the need for that, but I'm really happy that I have no negative charge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Taking the charge away is huge. And I'm not suggesting that you need to get to a place where you're happy about not being, number one. I'm saying, why not get to the place where you're happy about, hey, let's get to number one. Yeah, okay, we didn't get there before, but let's do it anyway. The journey isn't over yet. So I'm going to get myself into an even better feeling place. I'm not going to my point is, don't get stuck in, and I don't think you're going to do this. I'd be shocked if you did, actually. But to some X person, don't just stay in, well, okay, I'm neutral about that. I'll just leave it there. I won't do anything more. Because that's not growing anymore. Regardless of what your wants are, it's just not growing anymore.
But that is kind of what I'm saying. I could leave it there, and my life would be okay.
Yes.
I do feel an inclination to move
I guess what
forward.
I'm trying to describe somebody who just stops, and they don't do anything. You there's no way you would stop doing things. You just simply change your focus to something else.
Yes, that's true.
The person I'm talking about is the person who achieves neutral and just, okay, it's like my life is done.
Got it.
It's never done. Thank goodness.
Nope. Never done. Never done, because we get so many do-overs. I mean, even in this life, we get tons of do-overs. And if we don't get it right in this life, that's okay. We'll get it right in the next one. And if not that one, the one after that. We have so many do-overs. But if you don't believe that, then there's a whole lot of pressure on doing it right now.
Well, that's why I liked what Keisha quoted the other day. You can't get it wrong and you'll never get it done.
Right, which is an Abraham Hicks big-time quote.
It is. Although I also have to say, I like the positive version of that, too. The positive version of it is everything I do is right and the road goes on forever.
Oh, I've never heard that before. Is that some quotable thing that you learned from a specific source?
No, that's just me inverting it. Just taking the negatives and turning them into positives. That's all. You heard it here first.
Well, I do like the idea of thinking that everything that we do is right.
It is.
Because if you have a belief that everything that happens is right and that it's acceptable and that it's okay, then it means that even when you find something that on the surface may seem like there's something wrong with it, there's really something very right with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I do like looking at that.
And ultimately, it also means that instead of aiming for what's right, all we really have to aim for is what we prefer. Because if it's all right, then, okay, which one do you want? You get your pick. Go for the stuff you like. Go for the stuff you enjoy. Go for the stuff that jazzes you. Go for the stuff that makes you get excited. Go for the stuff that makes you really want to live life, because that's what we're here for. We're here for the abundance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think we have time to go on to the next section, but sorry, go ahead.
No, right now my thoughts just went to new listeners. Not quite sure what to do with that, but there was just this kind of feeling inside of me of appreciating new audience members, new people who are listening, new people who, some may be getting onto a new journey. Some may be extending a journey, and this is just a new environment, a new place for them to take in what they're interested in. Some may be listening going, oh, my God, that's a bunch of crap, and I love you too. I accept that perspective.
To which we reply the same to you, yes.
No. I mean, really, I'm so open to everybody has their own right to have an opinion. That's kind of one of the things Jerry was, learning, and what Abraham was espousing is that, let other people be who they are, do what they do without our needing to change it, but just going, it's okay. Everybody has the right to do what they do, and we don't have to like it. But it's not our job to judge it either.
That's right.
Because, those who do the judging and become activists for something, if they stay in the negative space of it, if they stay in the anger and the fury, because that's what fuels them to try to make change, they're going about making change in a way that's not only slow, but may never occur. I mean, I remember Just Say No, which was Nancy Reagan's thing about the war on drugs and that there was a war on drugs. Well, I haven't seen anything in the news or, not that I really pay attention, but like I haven't heard any declaration saying, oh the war on drugs is over.
We won the war. Hooray.
Yeah, no more drug abuse is occurring. Every rehab center is being closed down, and turned into some other wonderful thing because people are no longer abusing drugs. Yay, we got that taken care of. But, the war on drugs did not end the war on drugs.
No, neither did saying no.
And neither did saying no. So, going the negative route and holding on to the fury that we need to war against and fight against something certainly doesn't get us the result that we're really going after.
And one last thought, too, for those new listeners you were referring to, it's probably a little bit weird hearing what we talk about for the first time because there's a lot of context that comes from previous episodes.
And we're weird. We're self-acclaimed
We
weirdos.
are weird. This is a bit of a madhouse, to be perfectly honest. But we're glad that you joined the madhouse. We're glad, everybody needs to be a little bit mad every once in a while. If you're not mad, there's something wrong with you. So welcome, and we're glad to have you here, and very appreciative that you decided to join us. And we really hope you subscribe to and keep listening to all the shows because, hey, one of the main reasons we do this is because we love talking to you guys. By the way, you might even consider calling in and talking to us one time. I mean, that's one of the things you can do on the homepage is see how you can talk to us during a live podcast. So think about doing that too.
And if you really think we're just crazy, listen to a couple shows and maybe get a little bit more context so you can really understand where our craziness comes from.
Yeah, because it really does come from a good place of love and fun and having a great time, and that's ultimately what makes it such a positive show. Wendy, it's been great, but I can't wait to do it again tomorrow.
Well, we're going to have to.
Good.
23 hours, and we'll be back.
All right. We hope you join us tomorrow and every day as well here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye for now.